Secondly, just as a disclaimer, we talked about doing this program like back in October or November. So this was already scheduled. And then, as we know, life happens. And there are, amazing, terrible, awesome, incredible things happening that are in some ways related a little bit to the topic that we're going to be talking about. I first did this about almost 4 years ago with my chavara, for which some members of my chavara are here, including Debbie Kagan from this, the Chaikas are members of that group as well. And I did this program shortly after the Charlottesville riots, because I was curious about, I've been curious about the whole Civil War thing and the role of Jews anyway, which I'll tell you about in just a second from this, but I thought it was important to have an understanding that Jews have had a role in political life on both sides from this for a very long time from this. And we can be critical of people, we can be admiring of people from this, but there is a long history of Jewish involvement in the war effort from this. And this is something that we do not teach our children. And this is something that many adults may or may not know, which is why the session that we're going to do today is going to be a little bit interactive. It's going to be a multiple choice test, as it were. So we'll get to that in just a second. I was born and grew up in Arlington, Virginia, and that was my home for the first 14 or so years of my life. My brother Mike, who is on the call with us today, is currently living in Arlington. Arlington, Virginia, in the 1950s, it was then and remains basically a bedroom community of Washington, D.C. In the 1950s, Arlington, Virginia was segregated. For my first years of school, I was bused to, as part of the Brown v. versus Board of Education from this, and I was bused to another elementary school and then wound up going to one that was closer to my home. I grew up in an area that had segregated water fountains, segregated bathrooms, and when I took the bus to Hebrew school, it was very clear that if you were Black, you sat in the back of the bus, and that was strictly enforced. And if there were not enough seats for people who were white, if you were Black, you were supposed to give up your seat. So this is the background that I grew up with. January 19th was a state holiday in Virginia, and it was called Robert E. Lee Day. And every January 19th, the state offices were closed, but the schools were not. And we went almost every year to the Custis Lee Mansion at Arlington National Cemetery. If you're looking at the Washington, standing at the Lincoln Memorial, and you're looking straight across the bridge, and you see the grave of JFK with the eternal light, and you go straight up, there is a house at the top of the hill. That is known as the Custis Lee Mansion. The Custis Lee Mansion was originally owned by Martha Custis Washington, George Washington's wife, passed through the family, and Robert E. Lee's wife was Mary Anna Custis Lee, who was the great-granddaughter of Martha Washington. And he lived in this house for long periods of time, including during the Civil War. And every year on his birthday, we went to the Custis Lee Mansion, took a tour, and then we went over to see the Confederate Memorial in Arlington National Cemetery. And on the way back to our schools, we sang songs like, I wish I were in the land of cotton, old times there are not forgotten, look away, Dixieland.
Wow.
Okay. So that is my background. My brother is checking me and said he only lived there lived at the Custis Lee Mansion for 2 years before the war, but it is still the house that is connected to him. So let's begin. Are you ready to share screen? Okay. So we are, like I said, we are going to do this as a little bit interactive. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. I know what you're showing. You are showing the PDF. You are not showing the, you're not showing the PowerPoint because I can already see the answers.
Don't look, guys.
Don't look.
Oh, that's because it's animated. This is, you can see, it says PowerPoint. This is it.
Oh, really? All
Yeah,
right.
this is the PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. We'll see how this goes. So first I wanted to show you all a map.
Excuse me a second, it would be helpful if you put it on slideshow and then it shouldn't show the other things unless it was typed in there to begin with.
Yeah, no, this is now slideshow mode. When I minimized it to show that it was PowerPoint,
Okay, thank you.
wow, it
So
went
I
into the
wanted
other
to
end.
give you an idea from this of what the United States looked like at the beginning of the Civil War from this. And as you see from this, we have an area called the United States of America. That was the part that's called the Union. We have the Confederate States of America. From this, we have what was considered the border states that either sided with the Union, sided with Confederacy, was kind of a mix of both from this, and they were considered like the border states, which also included, as you see, Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky from this, and Missouri from this. Then we have other areas and territories of the United States from this. But here's an interesting fact that I just recently learned, which is we have 50 states. What state of the Union does not have a single memorial or monument, a public memorial or monument to the Civil War of the 50 states? Any ideas?
Alaska?
No.
Hawaii?
They have three. Hawaii has one.
Oh,
Isn't that interesting? The answer is
is Maine?
Maryland?
nope,
Kansas?
nope. The answer is Oregon. That is the only state that does not have a public monument or memorial to the Civil War.
You
So
mean it's not Texas, Sue?
Texas has the largest number of public memorials and monuments. And the state that has the second largest number is Florida.
So
Yeah,
you're
but
referring to Confederate monuments, right?
I'm just talking about the Civil War, for which, by the way, from this, we call it the Civil War, which was the term that was used in the North. In the Confederacy, what was the war called?
The War of Northern Aggression.
Or
The war between the states?
Or the war between the states. Okay, the War of Northern Aggression. Okay, let's move on.
Well, I was gonna say that Oregon also, like, Black people couldn't own land or even like live in Oregon.
That's correct.
So they didn't need any memorials.
That is correct. Okay, so our first question is, the number of Jews living in the US at the time of the Civil War is estimated at, and you have four choices here. Any ideas? Now this is in 1860.
A.
B.
A,
D.
B.
E.
okay. Can you show the correct answer, please? Can you, oh, there you go. It is estimated that there were about 150,000. The states that had the most Jews were in the following order: were New York, South Carolina, Massachusetts, and Georgia. Oh, I'm sorry. No, not Georgia, Louisiana.
Really? Oh,
Wow, New Orleans.
All right,
Ports.
next slide.
yes.
Which of these rabbis owned slaves prior to and during the Civil War? And you have choices of a rabbi from Memphis, Tennessee, two from Richmond, Virginia, and one from Charleston, South Carolina. Any guesses?
Charleston.
Same.
Charleston? Any other guesses?
All of them.
I say all of them.
all of that.
All of the above, yeah.
All right, now this is, to understand that this is before and during the Civil War, okay?
Yeah, all of them makes
That
sense.
would be South Carolina.
Okay, would you show the correct answer, please?
It's all of the above, isn't it?
Are you showing it?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
No, could you go back? Oh, you're not seeing it,
You're not seeing it?
no.
No.
Oh,
We just-
Getting the question, but not the answer.
It looks like the screen needs to be made smaller so that we
Smaller.
can see the whole screen.
Can you, yeah,
oh, interesting.
I'm only seeing
I
part of the
can't-
screen.
can you reduce
So
this?
maybe this is the only way to do screen sharing. I mean, and have it in SlideShare mode.
I will tell you that the correct answer was C, Rabbi George Jacobs, who used slaves, he rented slaves for housework.
Hmm.
But it is estimated by Jonathan Sarna, who wrote an excellent book about Jews in the Civil War, that prior to the Civil War, 75% of Jews living in the South owned slaves. And of that 75%, 75% of that owned at least 100
Ooh,
A lot.
wow.
because they owned land that required from this field work. All right? This is not to say that these other rabbis didn't own slaves, but prior to and during the Civil War, George Jacobs continued to have slaves. Could you move forward to the next slide, please? In the information that I'll be sending out to everybody from this is some background about George Jacobs from this, and also to remember that most of the rabbis, in fact, all of the rabbis that we're talking about were not trained in the United States. They all emigrated from Europe at some point. Okay,
Not surprising.
all right.
Sorry.
Next one, please.
Sorry, I was playing around with a different view. Now I have to figure out how to undo that.
Okay,
Um,
we
We're
can't,
seeing the same thing, which is the same slide, just not the periphery. We lose edges.
hold on. I clicked a bunch of things to see if I could make it better. Now I'm doing. let's see, there we go.
Display settings?
So no. I mean, there's a bunch of settings, and there was presenter view, and presenter view was where I see the current slide and the next slide so that the presenter can kind of gather their thoughts, but that didn't seem to help. I have a whole lot of things. I have, black screen, white screen, last viewed, help, and show. I have lots and lots of options,
that's okay.
but I don't have a, format the screen for a viewer whose screen has different aspect ratio.
All the people who are attending today will get a copy. No. Goodness, all the people attending will get a copy of the whole PowerPoint. So let's just move on. Okay,
Did you want this slide or move on to the next?
let's go to the next slide, please. Okay,
Oh,
all right. So the question is, which of these rabbis from this was considered to be the hero of the pro-slavery movement, though he did not own slaves himself? And your choices are Rabbi Rafal from B'nai Jeshurun congregation in New York City, Rabbi Jacobs from Shearith Israel in Columbia, South Carolina, Rabbi Henry from B'nai Jeshurun in Cincinnati, or Rabbi Ilaway from New Orleans.
Hmm,
New York.
D.
not D.
D?
Mm-hmm.
And
C. Rabbi Henry.
B? We have a vote also for New York. All right. I don't know if we can show the correct answer, but if we can, I will tell you that the correct answer is
Can you see that? Because I can see the correct answer on my screen.
no.
No, we can't.
No.
Okay, well, that's frustrating.
The correct answer is A, Rabbi Rafal.
Wow, New York.
And we're going to talk about him in just a moment. Could you move to the next slide, please?
And so this is the same B'nai Jeshurun that some of us have visited in New York? In
Yes, it
Manhattan?
is. Yes,
Whoa.
that is Rabbi Rafal. He was an immigrant from Sweden. He was trained in England. He came to the United States in 1849, where he took the post at B'nai Jeshurun, and he served there until a year before he passed away. So if you'll go to the next slide.
19 years.
Mhm.
And you're saying he was in favor of slavery, but did not own slaves?
Here it is. The Jewish arguments
Ah,
in favor of slavery claimed which of the following? A, slave holding is not a sin. B, slave property is expressly placed under special protection by the 10 Commandments. And C, a slave is a person and has rights that do not conflict with the lawful exercise of the rights of the owner. So which do you think it is?
B.
A.
C.
A.
B, C,
C.
A.
All right. The correct answer is all of them.
mm,
Why is it all of them? It is all of them because if you'll go to the next slide. And, oh,
Again, I can see it, so it's,
I know.
sorry.
that we can.
don't cheat.
No.
Keep going, keep going. Now to the next slide. This is the, on January 1st, 1861, Rabbi Rafal gave a discourse called The Bible View of Slavery and gave a very, very traditional interpretation of what Torah said. That, and all of the things that were in the previous slide, that is exactly what Torah says. With no commentary from this, no talk about what did Rashi say, what did Rambam say, or anything else. A totally literal interpretation of what Torah says. And Jews, particularly in the South, grabbed onto this. Oh, this is not a sin, because this rabbi in the North said that this is absolutely correct from this. And so, and you can actually check this out of some libraries. And I was actually in touch with B'nai Jeshurun to find out if we had any other information about this, but they have not gotten back to me. So
I'd like to see his Haggadah.
I know.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking the same thing.
So I have to say that though he opposed slavery, he argued that the Bible
Star.
for the three reasons cited from this. And the person who came against this terribly was Rabbi David Einhorn, who was a leading abolitionist from the pulpit of his congregation in Baltimore, Maryland, from this. And he was basically chased out of town by a mob because he did not agree with Rabbi Rafal.
Whoa.
So, next slide, please. Which of these statements was included in the first Jewish prayer before Congress? One was, may our union be preserved and its defenders be shielded from danger. One was, piety cannot subsist apart from patriotism. We love our country because God has given it to us into a blessing and a heritage for our children. And the third one, we call on Congress to adopt the way of moderation and equity so that from the North and from the South, from the East and from the West, one feeling of satisfaction may attend their labors.
I noticed this question is not tied to Civil War years or war of Northern aggression years or war between the state years.
You think so?
Well, I'm just saying they don't, it just says what was in the first Jewish prayer. And I don't know when we made our first Jewish prayer.
We're going to talk about that in just a second. Who said it?
Number one, A.
A? Anybody else?
All of them.
All of them?
A.
A
At the same
refers
time.
to the,
Can't be because it's one speech and these are three different speakers.
Okay.
Right.
The
A
correct,
refers to the preservation of the Union, which does imply Civil War times.
okay.
Right. I might go with B. I don't know.
The correct answer is C,
C.
Rabbi Rafal. Please go to the next slide.
So
Now,
let's have a wartime.
interesting.
Here he is again.
He was at that he appeared before Congress. Had the Civil War started?
1860, pretty close, not yet.
1861.
Just a few minutes.
But it was moving in that direction, and this was well before he had come out with his whole the treatise that we talked about just a few minutes ago. He was invited by Representative Colfax, who later became the vice president under Grant. He wore a talit and a yarmulke. He spoke Hebrew, and he argued that the biblical law permitted the owning of slaves from this. And I have to tell you that members of Congress were outraged that a rabbi was allowed to recite a prayer on the floor of the House. And a month later, with a 59% majority after 2 rounds of voting, they did 2 things. One, they installed a Methodist minister as its first congressional chaplain, and 2, it banned rabbis from giving an invocation before Congress.
Wow.
That was not broken until the early 1900s.
Years.
So that's that. Next slide, please. We'll talk about these guys later for this, but Rabbi Max Michaelberg will be done. We'll talk about him later. Okay, go ahead. We'll talk about him. Well, Rabbi Michelbacher from this, from the congregation in Richmond from this, created the first prayer for the Confederate States from this, which included a prayer for President Jefferson Davis. Next, please.
They also just wanted to make you aware it's 12:25, so we should probably be at the halfway point.
We have a lot of things to go through. You know what? Let's skip this. Let's skip this slide, but I just want to briefly point out what's on the next slide. Okay. This is the oath of allegiance that to remain in the Union, people who were conscripted had to say. And you see that some of this is highlighted. The highlighted section, where you hit the next thing, is what we're going to hear Kamala Harris say this coming week. It is taken directly from the oath that was for the Union, from this, and that is completely different from what it says that the President of the United States says when they come into office. Next slide.
This is also the oath that is taken by every federal employee.
I had to take it. Next, please. Here's the number of Jews who fought in the Civil War. Any ideas?
We know there were 150,000 Jews.
Approximately.
That's men, women, and children.
This point, I'm getting surprised by all the answers.
B.
I'm going
B.
with A.
B.
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 Correct answer is?
I'm getting A.
A.
Correct answer is? Estimate from this, because it's still not clear even now how many there were, but we do know that at least 500 Jews died during the war. Okay.
On
Next,
both sides or on just one side?
total.
Total, okay.
Total. Okay, next, please. President Lincoln's primary Jewish advisor was?
I want to say A.
I know who Jefferson Davis's was.
No, who was his primary? Oh, well, no, don't give it away. Don't give it away. That's coming up.
Okay.
D? D? B? D?
No idea.
B.
I just can't go with the chiropodist.
The answer is?
A.
D.
I'm going A. I'm going A.
Did he own a business?
Go to the next slide, please.
He wasn't corrupt.
I bet you President Lincoln had nice toenails.
Actually, from this, he was introduced by somebody from Congress. From this, and Mr. Zakari became his primary advisor. From this, we have a picture of him coming up in just a moment from this, but this is one of the things that he helped to do. It was an organization of Jewish spies that went from this to check on the South. So what was their cover?
A. Peddlers? A.
C.
A.
Horse traders.
Peddlers.
Peddlers.
A.
B.
A.
So the answer, they were peddlers.
They were peddlers.
Of course they were peddlers.
That's the easiest way to be able to go from state to state.
That's right. Could you go to the next slide, please? I want to do a whole thing about this guy because he is absolutely fascinating from this. And after Lincoln's assassination, he took care of Mary Todd and her family for a while. From this, he had doors open for him because of his association with Lincoln. From this, he became very wealthy. He later left it, and I think he went to, as I recall, he went to Chicago, and I think that's where he is buried. From this, is close to Springfield.
Where, at what date did he die? It's cut off from the bottom.
He lived until 1900.
Wow.
Next slide, please. Hello? Oh, there we go. Okay. Is this talking about Raleigh?
Oh, no, I was talking about,
Yeah.
Benjamin,
Okay, so Isidore Strauss from R.H. Macy. This is one of his very first jobs when he was quite young. What did he do?
A bond
D.
salesman.
he may have been B, because I know he spent time in Europe.
He did. He did.
I'm going to say D.
D.
B.
The correct answer is he was a Confederate bond salesman
That makes sense.
in London. Okay,
Oh,
Ah.
golly.
go to the next slide, please.
Good guess, that's all. Guess,
Agent.
guess.
Okay,
You had some really good Southern history, I know.
that's him. That is what some of the bonds are. Look at the interest rate. At 8% during the Civil War. That's pretty awesome. The last of the Confederate bonds was redeemed in 1865. In spite of his support of the South, he later moved to New York. From this, helped to start the R.H. Macy Company. From this, he was elected to Congress from, I believe it was the 2nd District of New York, and he and his wife died on the Titanic.
Ooh, wow.
Okay, so do you know about his brother?
No.
His brother had a real affinity for Israel, and they'll be really quick because this is your show. And so he wanted, when they were on this European trip, he wanted to spend more time in Israel. And he kept getting letters from his brother, whatever, to cable saying, you need to get over here because our ship's going to leave. You're going to miss the ship. And he decided to stay in Israel. He did fundraising for Israel. He was loyal to Israel, a total Zionist all of his life. Oh, by the way, he didn't make it to the Titanic.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I just read this recently. I couldn't begin to tell you the source.
I'm sorry. He represented the 15th district in New York. So next slide, please.
8%. I wish my Israel bonds paid that.
So actually, there are
I know
5
this one.
on the slide. So during the Civil War, President Lincoln signed legislation to appoint chaplains to each military regiment. The first Jewish Army chaplain was
A.
a liquor dealer with some basic Jewish knowledge. B, ordained rabbi. C, a peddler who had studied in the yeshiva in Poland. D, a student rabbi. Or E, not Jewish.
Ooh.
Not Jewish.
Not Jewish.
E.
I remember something about a liquor dealer.
Okay. There are actually 2 correct answers to this.
C.
A
A
and B.
and E.
Liquor dealer and C.
And B, no. And
Oh.
C. All right.
He was
So
an ordained, wait a minute, he was an ordained rabbi, but he only had some basic Jewish knowledge?
no.
Okay.
The first one was a man named Michael Allen, and he was a liquor dealer from Philadelphia, and he was appointed by the 5th Pennsylvania Cavalry to act as their chaplain. So he ministered to Jews and to non-Jews. Well,
Okay, which is still the way it happens, isn't it?
rabbis found out about this. They said, oh, no. If you're going to be a Jewish chaplain, A, you better be only working for Jews, and B, who is this guy anyway? So they got Lincoln to appoint a rabbi for this to become the first Jewish chaplain. And when he was appointed, Allen stepped down because of poor health.
And spend more time with his family.
Right. So you can see who our two people are.
He went back to drinking.
That's and that's this Rabbi Jacob Frank on the right, and he was the one who was actually appointed by the president.
Does
Okay.
does he look a little like Roy Walter or vice versa?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Next slide, please.
interesting comment.
Okay. We're just going to slide through this real quick, but I'm just going to tell you the story about this man. And get to the important stuff. There's a man named Henry Wentworth Monk. He was a Canadian, and he had actually obtained an audience with President Lincoln, and it was, of all of the things that are here, to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. Now, if you'll go to the next slide, this is a picture of Henry Wentworth Monk, who was a Messianist. He lived in Israel for a period of time. He tried to get Lincoln on board with this. Lincoln was interested and amused by him. Of course, didn't do anything else with the information for this. But one of the things that was referenced in the other thing is about an extremely dark period during the Civil War, if you'll go to the next slide. So you all know the picture of Ulysses S. Grant. And during the war from this, because he was so frustrated with what was going on with the war, and particularly because he saw that there were Jews who were giving a lot of money and assisting people from this, is that he created what was called Order Number 11, banned Jews, if you'll go to the next slide, as a class from Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And during this period, at least Jewish families in Paducah, Kentucky, were physically expelled from these areas and were not allowed to return from this. And then there were Jewish families in Mississippi who were temporarily expelled. There's a question about how many. When word got to Lincoln about this, he said, no, from this, and it was rescinded. But I have to tell you that only some of the Jews who were expelled from Mississippi returned, and none of the Jews from Paducah returned.
Where did they go?
It's not clear, but they went to other states. But when it was rescinded and they were allowed to return, they did not.
But later on, he became a friend of the Jews.
He did.
As president, yeah.
So there's a book about this. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a very easy part of a series, very easy to read. I wish I could remember. You may have used it.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end. Next slide, please.
It was also in a novel. That's where I learned about it. I don't remember the novel's name, but.
Grant by Chernoff.
The largest Jewish military cemetery outside of Israel is located in which of these states? And the parentheses is the number of Jewish soldiers buried there.
Only got 3.
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg.
Gettysburg, Columbia, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, and Shreveport, Louisiana.
Oh, this is hard.
Gettysburg.
Military cemetery.
Richmond.
If just Jews?
D,
Yeah, I would say Richmond.
Shreveport, Louisiana.
Jews.
Only Jews. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Jewish cemetery. Jewish military cemetery.
Richmond? I don't know, I have no idea.
Correct
Columbia.
answer is
I think
Columbia.
Shreveport.
Columbia. Correct
Columbia.
answer is,
Huh?
tell us. Hello, Karen?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wow.
Richmond was the capital of the
Gettysburg.
Confederacy, so it makes sense that it would be there.
Always Montgomery was.
Please move to the next slide.
Hey, Sue, do you know where in Richmond that is?
It is near Rabbi Mickelbacher's synagogue, the congregation Beit Haba. From this, that is what it looks like. You can actually take a tour there. It's very interesting about the gating and so forth. They had soldiers also, excuse me, from Texas, from this who are buried there. But it's a total of 30, and it is the largest exclusively Jewish military cemetery outside of Israel. So, next slide, please. This is a man named Moses Jacob Ezekiel from this. He was an amazing sculptor. And he's the one who created the Confederate monument that I talked about. That's in Arlington Cemetery. Here are 3 sculptures that might have been made by him. Which of them was created by him? One is in the U.S. Capitol Visitor Center. One is displayed over the Speaker of the House in the U.S. House of Representatives, and one was called Religious Liberty for the Philadelphia Centennial. Which of these was also created by him?
C. I'm going to go C also.
C. Okay. The correct answer is B and C.
Wow, both. Oh.
We'll go to the next slide. I need to give a little information about him. So that is him. That is what the Confederate Memorial looks like at the cemetery. He was the first Jew to be admitted to the Virginia Military Institute. He left to serve in the Confederate Army. Then after the war, he went back. He studied to VMI, graduated from there. He studied art in Cincinnati. He moved eventually to Rome, where he lived out his years. In 1914, he took a $40,000 commission from the United Daughters of the Confederacy to create a Confederate monument. That is how much money in today's money?
A lot.
About $1.2 million.
Wow.
Wow.
He did not attend the dedication of the ceremony of the monument, but President McKinley did.
And then they shot him.
President Wilson did, because it was dedicated in, I'm sorry, it was McKinley who dedicated it. He died in Rome in 1917, and at his request, he was buried at the foot of the Confederate monument. Shortly after the events in Charlottesville in 2017, 28 of his surviving kin wrote a letter to the Washington Post requesting that they remove the Confederate monument from the cemetery. That has not happened. So, but it's
I thought you said he was a member of the Confederate Army.
he was,
Well, then why would they want that?
because they were ashamed.
They were ashamed of it. They didn't want an association with
Right.
the
And
Confederacy.
there are approximately 20 Confederate soldiers who are, soldiers who served in the Confederacy who are buried around the monument. So,
But even if they, it was a fact. It was a fact, it happened.
I understand that. I understand, and then that opens a whole thing about.
Yes,
you know,
it does.
down monuments and so forth. So the next slide, please.
Excuse me for a minute, Sue, because I thought that part of the purpose of this was to try to improve relations between Jews and Blacks, that you have this information and then you can go forward. And I understand owning up to what Jews did do during the Civil War, but this seems to be just an emphasis on that rather than an emphasis on both sides. And there were things on both sides that Jews did that were both good and bad.
Sure.
And I really was hoping for more of a dialogue around that, particularly since I found the first announcement that went out, and even the second announcement, quite offensive, because it had the Confederate flag on both. And if this was a discussion just about Jews in Germany, we certainly wouldn't have the Nazi flag,
Sure.
Nazi German flag.
Sure.
There in Germany, they took down all monuments to Nazis. And to have a discussion about, well, why would you want to take down a Confederate monument? I think is an important discussion, but it shouldn't be a question really, especially for Jews who don't want monuments in Germany about Nazism.
You're right. You're right.
Well, I think it's important to realize that I think we all have this Abraham Joshua Heschel, oh man, Jews marched and Jews have always been in favor of civil rights and all of that, that it's just very enlightening to me. Kind of broadens my mind that we really cannot rest on our laurels from that one march with Martin Luther King. And especially since the Torah itself was used to justify slavery recently, in human memory, that I understand that maybe this program isn't what was expected in terms of reconciliation between Jews and Blacks, but I think the first step is for us to understand ourselves and and not have illusions about who we are.
Well, and I'd like to say though that the civil rights movement wasn't the first time, because if you know the history of historical Black colleges and universities, when no other university would take Jewish professors and their families, they took them on their campus, let them teach and let them live, and protected them at all costs.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't go back.
I think also what Debbie is saying is certainly some of this information is not information that, I was aware of. I'm from the North, so we didn't study some of this, but it's things that we as Jews have to think about because we have probably not been as, quote, pure as we would like to think about. It's unsettling, but when I said it's there, it is there.
Okay, I'm a born Jew, okay? And you can see I'm Black, okay? I am a born Jew. This is my mother, born Jewish. Everybody, we can go back generations to generations. The thing is when you want to talk about reconciliation, even if we're not going to get to that in this discussion, showing the Confederate flag with Israeli flag was hurtful, disturbing, and seeing it even after Wednesday, when Blacks weren't the only people that were attacked and hated against on Wednesday, because there was a lot of anti-Semitism too.
Yes.
That we should never, even if we're studying history, we should never promote
This
that.
is a history class, isn't it, Sue?
But
you're not listening to what she's saying.
No matter what, after Wednesday, even if that was your advertisement from the beginning, after the insurrection on the Capitol and that flag was flown for the first time in the United States Capitol,
let me say,
we did not support showing and flying it and showing it flag. I will tell you, I was so shaken and disturbed that I emailed Rabbi Teller because I was so upset. And for you to say, right, we have to acknowledge what Jews did in the Civil War, but we don't have to acknowledge it with the Confederate flag.
You know what? It's so important that you can speak here safely and bring this up because, you know, that we are doing a lot of reading about race relations, just that thankfully, and we're realizing that there's a lot of things that we liberal-minded, open-minded, intelligent Jewish people that we just don't think about just because of where we've been. So it's really, really important that you can say this here so this group can hear you and then become even more aware so it doesn't get repeated. It has to be a safe environment where people can say, you just hurt my feelings. And here's why. And that's okay because we need to know.
And I have to say that I didn't pay any attention to the announcement from this. And I was only looking for the link from this to make sure that people had that. And I should have been more mindful of that from this. Because I didn't look as to what artwork was being used to advertise this.
Hi, I think I need to apologize. I really don't know why that artwork was chosen, but it was taken down. It was certainly taken down as quickly as somebody really noticed it. But I really feel like I do need to apologize for the fact that that was the artwork chosen. And I'm so sorry for that. I think it was hurtful and it was just inappropriate for so many reasons that you all have mentioned already. So I am sorry that that was done. There were other congregants who saw it and also emailed and asked, and it was taken down as soon as that happened. So again, I am so sorry.
And I appreciate that. And Lisa, I want to say, because you said what you said, I mean, you have reached out to me in different times in history, right? Like we have had conversations, our kids are close to the same age. We've experienced a lot of things at the same time in life, just general things. So I don't want you to think that you've ever failed in any shape, way, or form, because
No. I mean, just in recent months, I've been doing like just myself a lot of reading, and it's just a slap in the face eye opener. I mean, like, because here you think, oh, I would never think that, and then you don't realize what's it called? Black starts with an S. I just can't think of the word. It always.
A learning.
The book that we read in book club. Anyway, it's just important to have honest conversations, and especially in safe places, because seriously, it's like we just forget what we say sometimes. It's ignorance. It's not good. But the only way you can correct it is by bringing these attentions higher. And in your mind. I think it's really important.
Is the book White Fragility?
White Fragility. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I was shocked at myself when I read that book.
Yeah, it's right on target. Yeah.
That book is really eye-opening. And I recommend it for everybody. And that's not the only book.
White Fragility, is Robin the first or the last name?
I don't know, but it will start you on a reading course that will open your mind.
This is what we call an education, a learning moment.
Another book that's also taking hold, but I haven't read it yet, is called Caste, C-A-S-T-E.
Right, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
My book club is reading it. I've read that. That is a book I recommend for everyone.
And not
what is it called again?
Caste. Isabel.
And White Fragility is by Robin. Robin is the first name and D'Angelo is the last name.
Somebody in our study group recommended Cast. I think it might have been Iris.
You
Yeah.
see it? Cast by Isabel Wilkerson.
I'm sorry, what is Cast by Isabel?
CASTE. It's wonderful.
It's really well written.
It's disturbing. It's very, very disturbing, but it's a must read.
Yeah, these disturbing books are must reads because we really have to have this in our face in order to really begin to understand institutional racism, which is just a whole other issue.
Especially for those of us who grew up in the South and Jewish and also experienced anti-Semitism as well as what was going on with Blacks and whites. It's a lot to take in. I mean, there is your life and you
Marty, it is so much because when you're both, boy, it's a lot of fun.
And it's not.
And I
just
think
the South.
assumptions
think
have
it's
been
just the
made that aren't
South either.
true.
I mean, it is all over this country.
Yes.
And that is what institutional racism is. It is a part of this country that we have to deal with. And this has always felt like a safe place, even though my granddaughter certainly didn't get that same feeling going to Jewish day schools even all the way through. She was told many times, even by kids who came to her bat mitzvah, well, you're not Jewish. Okay, never felt that at Brit Shalom, except for one time where we were in a class where the thing that the person said was corrected because they said all Jews are white, which no isn't true. And that was corrected that time very quickly. But other than that, I mean, at our spiritual home, my family has always felt welcome. So when we saw that flag in that announcement, it was very, very hard for us.
Right.
And I understand hearing a lot of the things that Jews did in the past that weren't good. I mean, there are a lot of things that we've done that weren't good. But you have to balance some of that too, and also understand where that's coming from.
Yes.
Also get the full picture.
Can I just say something quickly? So for those who remember me, I'm Cynthia Stetza. I moved 10 years ago to Charleston.
We miss you.
And you say it so well without the R.
I'm from New Orleans.
I gotcha.
New Orleans.
Franklin.
But I want to just quickly tell you a little something about Charleston. And again, not to take Sue's fire away here, but Jews were, the first Jews in Charleston are recorded in around 1697. I'm docent in Kahal Kadosh Beth Elohim as a congregation was formed in 1749, which is one of the first 5 congregations in the colonies. But I docent in the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery there that is connected with KKBE, goes back to 1764. Prior to the first rabbi was actually buried there in 1762, wasn't it was the Hazan cemetery family plot at the time. But I just want to go back to something you were talking about in Jews in the Confederacy, et cetera. There are something around 25 plus or minus veterans from the Civil War buried in that cemetery. Some were killed in the Civil War, some lived the full life. Every single every single veteran who is a Jew in that cemetery fought on the side of the Confederacy.
Surprising too.
And I guess there's I don't want to.
It's not surprising.
Not surprising. That's where they grew up. That was.
Let me just say quickly.
Let her finish.
The synagogue was built with slave labor.
Yeah.
The guy who built it, David Lopez, who was a member of KKBE. We have the names of the slaves who actually built it. And I just want to say, if you all are really interested in all this history and stuff, the Jewish Historical Society of South Carolina, and Sue I have an old I have a 10-year-old blue book. If your email address is in there, I'll send you this information of the Jewish Historical Society of South Carolina, because Jews have been in the Carolinas since the 1700s.
On top of that,
they have a ton of virtuals going on about the history of the Jews in South Carolina.
so I don't want to interrupt, but didn't
Go ahead.
anybody as a kid read a thin biography of Judah P. Benjamin and wonder? He was the treasurer of the.
Let me tell you something. So Judah P. Benjamin's, his family, a lot of the Benjamin family is buried in that cemetery. He goes, the interesting thing about Judah P. Benjamin, he goes to New Orleans, and you were talking about the oath they had to take. When the Union troops occupied New Orleans, they were trying to make everybody take that oath. Judah P. Benjamin refused to take it and left. Sue, do you know, are you aware of this? He left the States and never returned.
And you know, I was shocked.
He never knew it.
I was shocked as a child when I read about him.
Right. I grew up in New Orleans and didn't know the end part of it, that he left and never returned. Yeah.
He was part of a series of biographies that I read as a kid, and they were little bitty books. I can't remember the series, but
he lived in, I think he might have been born in Charleston, but I know his family is buried in that cemetery.
Do we have a consensus on how we want to like pull this together? And Sue, was there more that you were going to?
I only had 2 more slides to show from this, and we can skip that because there are, you know, I think probably having the discussion about this is a little more important. However, I do see that it is 1 o'clock and the program is supposed to be over. I think that this is something worthy of a further discussion from this, and thank you, Ellen, for bringing this to our attention as well. And thank you, Rhoda, from this also for your statements. Also, look, this is part of, as I said in the beginning, a Jewish history that most people do not know anything about.
That's true.
And I recently attended a talk about, for example, a new novel called The Third Daughter, which talks about Jewish slavery that occurred during the turn of the century from this and extended into and slightly past the Second World War, where Jewish women were taken from Russia and placed into prostitution in South America and the Americas and in other parts of Europe from this during a time when Jews needed money.
Wow, I did not know that.
And this is a very, very dark period from this. This is again part of our Jewish history that we know nothing about. It is worthy of our discussion from this. I think that we need to have a further discussion about Black-white Jewish relationships from this. And I would be willing to suggest that maybe if we're looking for something to do later in this year with CBS Women, this is the topic to do.
Yes, agree.
I think that's an excellent idea. As long as we have to be really clear that we're going to be in the room together and say things, that we have to listen really carefully to what people are saying so we don't create more blockages.
Exactly.
I read that.
Exactly. And I wanted to bring to all of you a history that was very interesting and very disturbing to me from this, and particularly as we're living through possibly something similar to that now from this. So I just wanted to bring this to people's attention, and thank you for letting me do this. And any last words from Lisa, from Karen?
I mean, I guess just the one thing is, you know, we have a program at noon next week too, but it's definitely not a similar theme.
I want to say thank you, Sue Resnick, because I'm
sorry.
They wanted to annihilate Jews off the face of the earth. Nobody wanted to annihilate the Black person.
Let's not go there, Hannah. Let's not go there, Hannah.
Okay, let's not go there.
That's not, yeah, let's leave that one alone.
But it is very relevant.
I just
No, it's, let's,
say I am so proud to be a member of Bridge Alone. This has been wonderful,
Right.
and I want to see us go forward with this. It really touches my soul here, and thank all of
Exactly, Marty, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just
No,
like to say something. This is a learning experience for Brit Shalom. I can guarantee you that whoever put up that artwork will think twice before they put up another piece of artwork, and that the Rhoda and the other leaders of the synagogue will look carefully at what comes out.
Yeah.
I agree that we need to have further the discussion, but it's not the end of the world. It was a learning experience.
Well, I think it's a real good beginning for us.
I think so too.
And Sue, your presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great, Sue.
Yeah.
great to learn like that, Sue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I understand
Yeah.
everyone who's attending will get a copy of the presentation. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. I've done some research on this and I'm trying to expand this a little bit more from this, and happy to answer your questions. So
Thank you, Sue.
Good seeing you,
Thank
Sue.
you very much.
Seeing you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, too.
And Ellen, thank you.
Yeah, Ellen, I was going to say, if you're still on the call and you want to stay on and talk afterwards, we can, and kind of talk about plans going forward. I'm sorry?
We had another meeting, so she had to
Okay.
get.
I
Yeah,
have to.
but you have my email. If you want to, stay on the call, we can stay on the call. If however you want to continue this conversation, because it definitely was, a learning moment for sure. Where again, yeah, we all think that we're sympathetic and understanding, and we're clueless. and I think of this as a parent. You say hurtful things when you don't mean to, and you strike wrong notes when you don't mean to. But thank you. I really appreciate you speaking up. I know it took you a while. We were IMing for a while, and finally I was like, this is an okay group to speak up to. But that still took a lot of bravery. So thank you for doing that.
I would say bravery, but I didn't also want to just interrupt Sue. I mean, I knew she was trying to cover a lot of material that is also important. I'm not saying that it's not, in a very relatively short period of time. And so that's why I waited a while until you said move to the next slide, and then I jumped in at that point too.
Good jumping. Good going. Thank you.
right for this. Well, thank you for that, Ellen, for this. And I know that you will be part of any further discussions that we have about this.
Yes, I'm happy to be.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sue, for launching this topic.
Thank you, Sue, for me coming from Israel. I didn't know anything about it. It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
There you go. Lots of, and also, I just want to say also, the end of the presentation, and it will also be in your PDF, is a list of resources that I used, and that it also includes some books. There's some things on C-SPAN. There are some YouTube videos and other things, and I would encourage you all to just spend some time educating yourselves about all of this. So, all right, y'all have a stay healthy and safe.